In today's episode, I speak to David Rogers about the myriad implications of returning to work for employers and employees following COVID-19. How will organisations persuade employees to make the commute to work and give up the freedom they now have? Will employees feel comfortable coming back to work if their friends from work have decided to work from home that day? Will these decisions cause more discrimination and claims of bullying? Listen up to the rest of the conversation. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today our guest is David Rogers. Hi Dave.
How are we doing, Judith? You well?
I am really cool, thank you. You?
Yes, I'm absolutely brilliant today, despite the weather.
I know it's cold and horrible, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, Dave, tell us who you are.
Okay, so I'm Dave Rogers. I'm a qualified accountant by trade. I've spent the last 25 years working in the private sector, with the last 15 years based in hospitality. Currently a head of finance at Marston's, one of the largest hospitality companies in the UK. Alongside that, I'm also a volunteer enterprise advisor with the Black Country Careers Hub, and also a board trustee on a local community charity project based in Wolverhampton called Hope.
Fantastic. You sound like you must be mega busy.
It is. It's been a very interesting year, as you know, as you can imagine. You know, the hospitality industry has been decimated, for want of a better word, with everything that's gone on. But despite that, working in a finance function, you know, it's become if it wasn't already the most important function in the business, making sure that we are remaining paying our people, paying our suppliers, you know, controlling our cash. But also, that the volunteering stuff outside of work, you know, always keeps me busy. It's one of the things I enjoy. It's one of the things I'm passionate about giving back, using my experience in the private sector, you know, back to whether it be students at the schools around the career strategy and mentoring and coaching, or whether it be as a board trustee at a charitable non-profit organisation, giving them some additional insight about how we do things in the private sector, and hopefully helping them improve the quality of the services we're providing the vulnerable people of Heathtown and the surrounding areas in Wolverhampton.
So Dave, that sounds really interesting. I think today it'd be really good to talk about what it's like for transitioning back into the office if you're an employee, and how that impacts their well-being. Is that something you want to discuss?
Yeah, that sounds a fantastic subject to discuss. It's certainly something that we as the business I operate in, as I'm sure other people across the UK, in fact across the world, have struggled with through the pandemic and the last 10 months.
Cool. So, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, I think there's a number of things. There's first of all, there's the commercial aspect of having empty office space throughout major towns and city, you know, throughout the UK. So there's the pressure that's putting on landlords first of all. In fact, that they've got no income. But I also think that the flip side to that is obviously that employees who were working in those office spaces, whether they're rented or owned by the business they work for, have sort of developed, for want of a better phrase, an element of freedom with the
Yeah.
with the way that you work now, and particularly around the flexibility of the flexibility that home working has brought to work-life balance as well. And I think that's going to be quite challenging for businesses when they start sort of reopening an office space. And how do you encourage people to go back to that office space they're used to not having to travel into work, for example?
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult to make that persuasive, isn't it? I mean, because why would somebody want to spend, I don't know, 2 hours on a tube or something to get to work when you don't have to?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Me personally, I'm relatively lucky. I live relatively close to where our office is based. But even so, normal rush hour traffic, it can be half hour, 45 minutes, either way. And that's actually, valuable time you could spend doing a school run. It's valuable time you could do, looking after your well-being and keeping fit. It could be, time spent working on a project for work itself. I think how businesses turn their offices into perhaps more collaborative spaces for sort of creativity and decision making, rather than just being, as a number of them are, banks of hot desks for people to pop in and or work from permanently. It's that sort of challenge that they'll have.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about the difference between introverts and extroverts. So I'd imagine the introverts would be quite happy to be at home, and the extroverts may be less happy if there are no way. Because I mean, there's one thing about having hot desks, but I'm sort of thinking if I was in that situation, you kind of like, do I want to go to work because my mate's not going to be there, or I'm not sure if they're going to be there, so I might end up having to be with this one, and I don't really like that one.
No, I get your point. I think it is very interesting, because even, again, speaking from personal experience, even when our office is closed again, with the current lockdown, but when we did reopen it, in sort of July, August time last year, there was very much you didn't have to go into the office if you didn't want to. So people were almost, as you would do with your friends arranging a night out at the pub, were almost texting and emailing each other saying, "Look, are you going in today or not?" And almost creating that social bubble, for want of a better phrase, that you do get from the, from working with colleagues on a regular basis. And I think, your point about the introverts and extroverts is incredibly important, because not just from the point of view, I think, of actually going in and out of, or going into an office, per se, but also the fact that you will have different people doing the same job. So when you do reopen an office space, you may find, again, as an example, that two accountants who are doing exactly the same job, one might have actually really missed being in an office environment, and one might be going, "Do you know what, actually, I'm just going to pop in for a couple of days a week. I'm happy working from home." And the business has to try and create a culture where that is okay. And I don't mean that from a sort of a strict HR policy and procedures point of view, but more from a business understanding that actually not everybody will be in an office from 9 to 5, or in most cases 8 till 6 nowadays. There's a lot more flexibility around that.
Yeah, I mean, and also, what happens if the employer wants the accountant that they think needs more support or checking in the office, and that's the one that wants to be at home?
Yeah, and again, that opens another interesting point. There is an element of, you have to build trust with your team, as you would do, even more so when you're all working remotely. But I also, that also brings another challenge around actually how do you instill the culture and or an induction process with people when you are working remotely, or maybe working the majority of your time remotely. And as you say, it could be an experienced employee, it could be a brand new trainee accountant. Ultimately, they both need to be inducted into into a new business, but they also need a different level of support as well. Which again is, particularly I think the new trainee point of view, I think is a huge challenge for businesses, how you deliver that support in a way that grows that person's career in the way it would have done if it was more physically face to face.
That's right, because it's amazing what you pick up. Because I think about my first proper job when I was 17, and I was hired to be an administrator in an insurance company, and I knew that I wasn't going to be doing that for long, because that's just not what I want to do. But I knew I wanted to just progress, so I used to do the work really, really well, quickly, and I used to bug people. What can I do now? What can I do now? What can I do now? And then they ended up teaching me how to underwrite, to shut me up, because I'd be there going, yeah, finished. Now what? Now what? And I'm just sort of thinking, if it was in a situation, so I became one of the youngest commercial underwriters in the if not the youngest commercial underwriter in the company. And I wonder if it was today, I would do the administrative work, and I'd probably just sit at home, wouldn't I, for like hours, because I'd do the work and then or not do the work. But I wouldn't have had the chance to progress, because I was physically able to stand at someone's desk and just bug the life out of them. Or I used to go up to people and say, have you got any overflow? Are you too busy? I'll take on board what you haven't finished yet, so I can learn. You can't do that if you're at home.
No, well, I think there's still the general principle of the type of person that somebody is. I think I have witnessed that that how you just described yourself. I've seen that in some people within an organisation where they will do that regardless of whether they're face to face or not. But I do think there is an element of, just to your point about learning new things, I think it's actually the flip side. It's the managers not being able, the leaders in the business not being able to see that spare capacity like you would do in an office environment. So you can witness people perhaps spending a bit more time on a project because they've got nothing else to do after that. Whereas if that's happening virtually, it's more difficult to spot it and see it. So I think it's sort of quite a mixed bag, for want of a better phrase, of the type of individuals and your ability to work out people's workloads at the same time.
Yes, that's a good point. Because you can't physically, and also that if you're in an office and you're walking about, you can see from people's expressions, how they act, what's normal for them, what's not normal for them, and whether there's issues or not. Which everybody can fake. Most people can fake half an hour meeting on video that everything's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. The other dimension I was thinking when you was talking about people getting together to come to the office, as it were, which sounds great. But I wanted to, this is my HR experience, my HR hat on now, because I was thinking the flip side is somebody who could complain that they're being bullied because nobody comes to the office when they're in, or just what I mean, or nobody's asking them if they're going to be in, or if they do ask, they don't come in. So whether there's an actual bullying, which would probably be quite unlikely, the perception of bullying could be quite high.
Yes, that's I'd never considered that actually as a potential challenge for businesses. I think it's quite an interesting one, because it is a difficult. I think it's probably more difficult dealing with this now than it's as in flexible working or home working, whatever you want to call it, now than it ever would have been, because we've had such a sustained period where I would even though there seems to be a lot more travel and traffic on the road in this lockdown than there was in lockdown 1, for example, I still think the majority of office workers are still working from home, if not all the time, the majority of the time. So this has almost become where 9 to 5 used to be the standard practice, sitting in an office. Now home flexible working has become the normal, and therefore, as you say, that whole enticing people back to the office, and if it becomes very, cliquey, for want of a better phrase, which it does in an office environment anyway, it could be it will be the same group of people that maybe, went to lunch every day, or be the same group of people keeping in contact about coming back into the office on a regular basis, as an example. It will be very interesting because, as you say, the people who either want to be invited back into the office need to feel like they can go back into the office, even if it's on their own or when other people are in there. And it's a very interesting dynamic, that is.
Sorry, I have to think about, you spend some of your life as a commercial underwriter, another part of your life as a HR person. One of the things you get really good at is thinking about risks.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And like you say, I think the whole situation is just, is potentially, you could classify it as one massive risk. In terms of the way the business even just approaches saying, right, our office is now open. Everybody can come back, but what does everybody can come back mean? You're going to have to be very. I think businesses are going to have to be very, very specific about what their flexible working policy is, which is a little bit counterintuitive. But if they aren't, I think that does open you up to the sort of, potential people feeling like they're bullied, or people feeling like they're still feeling isolated by, working from home, or whatever that might be. And the other thing is, some businesses may have situations where they decide to downsize their office space because not everybody's in at the same time. But what happens if you've spent an hour traveling into the office only to find every single hot desk's full, for example? So there's all sorts of challenges that come from bringing people back in.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that there's going to need to be more support on the culture, because what I sense is, in the beginning, it was, that kind of Dunkirk spirit, as it were. We're all in it together, and we're all kind of warring against this thing. And then this lockdown, everyone's kind of like, it's already moved into that this is already normal. So when people do come back to work, or if they don't come back to work, how do you maintain, one, the culture of the organisation, and two, the subcultures that are within? Because I think if you're in an organisation where you have office workers and non-office workers, for example, you're going to have part of your organisation that have either worked all the way through the lockdown, or have to come in and they put themselves at risk. And then it may look like, well, half the company can't be bothered because they're at home, and the other half is working really hard. And then you have that ivory tower, not even perceived, but kind of locked in between people going, it's all right for you over there. So it could be the other way around. It could be office workers going, I wish I could come to work every day. I don't know why you're moaning. Or, or I'd like to be at home looking after the kids. It's going to be kind of an interesting one.
It is, because it goes back to, for me, your point about culture is exactly that, is that companies have taken a long time to build their cultures, and trying to maintain that in the current situation is very difficult. I think it's again, if I spoke about hospitality just specifically because that's the sector I'm in, is we probably already have that situation with the sort of, you have pub teams working remotely in a unit and a head office. The pub teams have hardly worked. A lot of the head office have been working. I think it's one of those things where people, again, it goes back to a point I made earlier about sort of the biggest challenge around the culture is people, the whole company's ethos being around, it's okay for people to adopt different ways of working depending on your role. And I'm not sure that's necessarily clear at the moment for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, it's another one that makes me ponder is the whole well-being, because I think it's almost like there's a two-tier well-being. So the people who have suffered with mental health issues in the past aren't getting any more care now. But those who have not necessarily suffered from mental health issues but are struggling under COVID conditions are getting support. You know what I mean? And it's just it's almost like it's almost like well, everybody's missing meeting people. We understand that, so this is what we're going to do for you. But those that are bipolar, autistic, or whatever other neurodiversity that there is, aren't necessarily getting additional support.
Yeah, and again, I suppose going back to you one of your previous points, that does that create, as you say, this two-tier them, not quite them and us sort of situation, but possibly it does. I think for me the difficulties I've seen with the well-being situation is, and again, this might just be again specific because it's a larger organisations that I've tended to work for or know people who work for, is I think it's that whole, there's a danger that you end up, for want of a better phrase, sheep dipping everybody with the same support. And I suppose that's the point you're making, is that actually, does everybody need to know that, for example, you need to be getting outside and getting some fresh air and, and walking, probably yes. There's actually, when you're sharing, I don't know, support networks or helpline numbers, that if that's being shared with everybody, does it again isolate those people who really need it and perhaps have already got some support, network, and it is. It's the mental health side of the well-being through this whole situation. I think it's been great that it's brought it more to the fore, but I think it's what it exposes. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done around the specific requirements, as you say, for specific neurodiversities as well. And also how that is different when you are again able to visually see somebody's reactions on a day-to-day basis, and versus seeing them maybe once or twice a week on the end of a Zoom call.
And not everybody likes to do video Zoom calls either.
No. And sorry, I was just going to add to that, is that it's interesting, over probably the last fortnight, I've actually tried to use my phone more, because I think we've got into a situation where we've all embraced video technology, and we've almost created a habit now that is our go-to way of communicating now. Whereas actually, to your point, some of those people who, don't feel comfortable speaking on camera, don't feel comfortable having their camera switched on, they might get that. Yet they might feel more comfortable speaking to somebody on a telephone.
Yeah,
or speaking to somebody face to face.
Yeah, I agree. I've been working with a few clients where employees have expressed both sides of it. Either they don't like to be on video because they feel like people are paying attention to where they live, too much attention to where they live, and they feel they see other people with great houses and think my house isn't as nice. Maybe they think this about me now. The flip side of people saying, this person's so rude, we never see them on camera, they don't care about us, they want to be part of the group. There seems to, whichever end that you're in, whether you're in that I want to be on camera or I don't want to be on camera, it seems not to be necessarily tolerated by others, and that can cause a lot of problems. And I was having conversations with somebody and saying, well, especially now with children at home, people don't necessarily want their cameras on all the time because there's kids walking about. And their response was like, I don't mind seeing their children. It's like, but it's not up to you whether you mind seeing their children. It's whether they want you to see their children. It's not. And I think it's that kind of, everybody's in that sort of acceptance curve in a different place. And what you may think is acceptable may not be acceptable for other people. And there needs to be some sort of tolerance around that.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because what it's generated is, I think historically there's been a very black and white to decision making when it comes to these sort of policies and procedures and things, maybe. And I think what it's created is a very, very large grey area now. And it's either, it used to be it's either right or wrong to a certain extent. It's now, well, it could that could be okay, but it might get frowned upon by this group of people, and that then again creates that challenge of, is it acceptable for a manager of a team to say, actually, I want everybody's camera on? Probably not in the current environment, for all of the reasons you've just explained about what some of your clients have said. It's about people feeling safe, comfortable, and trusting that the businesses are there to support them in whatever situation that they're in. Because we could, I hope we don't end up in this situation, but we could end up with a situation where schools end up remaining closed, but office buildings reopen, and the impact that then has on people's ability to homeschool, and the impact of needing to be at home to homeschool, and your business is sort of saying, well, actually, we want you back in the office now. All of those things I think are very, very difficult to navigate.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And it just occurred to me, it made me sort of smile a bit to think that we have spent decades on conference calls without video. So it's ironic that people could turn around and say, well, I need to see you, but how do I know? It's like, well, how did you manage in the 80s and the 90s? Yeah. Even the 70s? Yeah. How did you manage without seeing someone? Because we've done it before.
Yeah. And I think I'll be honest, it may be that it started off as a bit of, going back to my point about it's such a strange situation that we found ourselves in for the large majority of businesses and employees. So probably with the exception of, the large tech companies that will have embraced this sort of thing 10, 15 years ago. Part of it to me, it's about not rebuilding trust, but ensuring trust is in place, that people are, doing what they say they're going to be doing. And I know that sounds a horrible thing to say, but I do believe that there is an element of that, going back to your point about, well, we coped on a conference call. So what's the difference between trusting somebody on the end of a conference call and trusting somebody on the end of a video conference call? There's no difference, is there? But I think there is a perceived difference in the current climate.
Yeah, that makes totally sense. I was just wondering, do you have any suggestions for managers on how they can help their employees back to work when it's possible?
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to one of the points that I made earlier. I think it's about creating an environment that is collaborative, that if you're getting together as whether it's a team, whether it's the manager and his direct or her direct team, whether it's a group of individuals within an organisation from different departments working on a project, you've got to make sure that it is value adding, and that's not just about it being commercially adding value to the business. It's about adding personal value to that employee's experience of going back into the office.
Yeah.
And and as I said earlier, it's about creating that environment that allows the creativity to flow, allows the fast decision making, but also provides an environment where people are able to support their well-being as well. So I go back to, I worked for, a large construction company back in the mid to late 90s when I first left university. And we were lucky enough to have two office buildings in and around Wolverhampton. One of them had a gym and one of them had two squash courts. So it gave you an opportunity to keep yourself fit, either directly before or directly, after, or even on a lunch time. Now, I'm not saying we need to go back to that sort of thing, but it's that type of approach where managers are thinking about what provisions they can provide within the larger office environment to help facilitate the well-being of their employees. So it could be, having quiet spaces for reading. It could be meditation rooms. It could be, it could be prayer rooms. It could be, if they've got food provision in the office building, it could be making sure that actually that is providing healthier options for food. It could be creating walking clubs. It could be having part of your employee rewards program discounted gym memberships. There's all sorts of things that innovatively we need to think outside the box as managers and leaders within businesses about how we support our employees and their well-being. And, one thing that's just come to me actually is one business that I know offers something called life leave to their employees.
Mm-hmm.
So this is in addition to their annual leave. So the company's approach is they say your annual leave is for you to go and rest, relaxation, recuperation, holidays, etc., etc. Your life leave is about needing to take 4 days off to move house, or integrate a new pet into the household, or take delivery of a new sofa or something like that, so that your annual leave is almost protected for you to use to make sure that you are as close to 100% sort of effective and efficient in both your life and your professional career as well, which I thought was a very, very interesting way of approaching it.
Yeah, I think that's totally good. It reminds me of Mark Bremner, who I spoke to on the podcast just before Christmas about his business, and everybody has unlimited holiday. So it's kind of the same sort of concept that people can take the time off that they need to do the things that they need. And having spoken to a lot of the leaders in his organisation, they're extremely, the staff seems to be extremely well engaged and productive, and it hasn't really caused any issues. And they're well versed with their colleagues going to them and saying, you need to take some time off. I haven't seen you take enough time, so nobody's really kind of accruing time at work without the holidays. I really think it's a good place to end. Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask you, Dave?
No, I don't think there is, Judith. It's been a very, very interesting and challenging conversation that we've had. I think there's a lot of things for a lot of people to think about.
Brilliant. Would you come back again if I find another subject to talk about?
Yes, I would. It'd be a pleasure to come back, Judith.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Dave as much as I enjoyed having it. At the Maverick Paradox, we improve your impact and influence by enabling you to effectively strategize, innovate, and execute. To find out more, contact me at judith@maverickparadox.com. Thank you. If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. Finally, if you would like to work with us or are interested in the Maverick at work, check out maverickparadox.co.uk.